So, ladies and gentlemen, I am very delighted to let you know, and just like Mehak said, that we have exciting keynotes, panel discussions, Q&As, and even many networking opportunities lined up for you today, starting with a keynote by Richard Millington, founder of FeverBee. So, over the past 13 years, Richard has helped 310 plus organizations, including Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, the World Bank, SAP, use powerful psychology to build thriving communities. We are all humans and we need psychology at some point in time. Through his Community Management Academy, he's also trained 1250 of the world's top community pros. So here's Richard speaking on the evolving community dynamics. Welcome, Richard. Richard, you're on mute. Yeah.
I knew that. I was testing you. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Give me a second and let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay, let me just do a quick check. Can everyone see my screen okay? I'm going to assume that's a yes. I can't actually see the chat, but just shout out if you can't. Okay, hi everyone. It's awesome to have this opportunity to speak with you all again. I think it's been a couple of years since I've participated in this event, but it's exciting to do it. And it's also very exciting to talk about the future of communities, some of the trends, and some of the things that we're seeing, some of the things that we're researching, and some of the things that we think are going to happen in the coming year, and especially in many of the years ahead. A lot of this comes from a presentation I gave at the beginning of the year, which is This is Community in 2024, which I made some bold predictions about things that were going to happen in this year. And some of them proved right, some of them were slightly less than correct. But I think now we're over the halfway point. It's interesting to reflect on where we're at. We've updated a lot of the ideas that we had with the new research that we've done and big surveys, big studies, really trying to figure out what's going on in this space. And most importantly, if you are running any kind of enterprise community today, what you need to do. And where we're at the moment is that I think there's three big trends that are driving this space at the moment. One, as you've heard already, is the implementation of AI, specifically whether it's going to help or harm our work. And obviously by AI, we're talking about generative AI. Two, the community everywhere era. If you know me, if you know some of the work I've been talking about over the last couple of years, you're probably absolutely sick of me talking about this idea. But I think more and more we're seeing that the community everywhere era is changing how each of us experiences communities and what we need to do. And the third is the idea that we need to drive growth. These economic headwinds that we've been encountering, especially for those of us who work with tech brands, aren't going away anytime soon. So we need to deliberately drive growth. But let's begin by talking about the technology side of communities, because I think whenever anyone complains about anything that's not going right in their community, they almost always talk about the technology. And part of the problem is that enterprise platforms stagnated a long time ago. If you look at an enterprise community experience from 10 or 15 years ago, it really doesn't look that different from what it is today. There's a hosted forum experience, a few bells and whistles around there, but for many of us, it hasn't really that changed. And in fact, a lot of the innovation that has taken place, especially over the last, I think, 7 or 8 years, has been driven by clients of these platforms who are developing their own customizations of that experience. And this is great because they can create a unique experience. But the downside of that is that then they have to pay for the upkeep. It becomes difficult for the vendor to support it. And I think we're starting to see some of these customizations either being incorporated into the platform or more they're being eliminated entirely. This is especially true for those of us on Chorus Aurora at the moment. That's going to be a change, and it's going to be very difficult to have your customizations go across to the new experience. So that's one thing we're seeing already. Two is that while there has been some innovation in this space, I think a lot of it has occurred at the lower end of the price spectrum. And I think the impact at the enterprise level has been limited, to say the least. If you look at the platforms that have emerged over the last 10 years or so, Mighty Networks, Zapnito, Better Mode, Hivebright, Circle, Flarum, they've done some interesting things. Some of them have a more forum experience, some have more of a Facebook experience, but this is where the innovation has come through. And these folks typically offer those simpler, cheaper, more social media style experiences, and they're targeting that creator crowd, the course maker crowd, and to a slightly lesser extent, smaller organizations. And I think what's really happened over the last 10 years is that the big major enterprise platforms have struggled. We know that Salesforce aren't really supporting their community experience anymore. We know that Chorus have gone through a bunch of changes. Higher Logic have been acquiring organizations and been struggling to swallow them in the right way. We know that Gainsight have acquired Insided. So it's been a lot of turbulence that's gone on there. But none of the major community platforms themselves have really thrived as a standalone experience. And part of that is because the enterprise platforms have been victims of this unbundling effect, where in the past, when we wanted to solve our needs, very often we'd go to this one central place. Often that was a forum. We wanted to chat with peers, build our reputation, learn the new techniques that were going on, the latest news, or find peers that we could connect with. We'd often go to a forum and browse around and find a solution there. But think about what you do today. Think about where you go to satisfy each of these needs. It's probably not a forum experience that often. It's probably more likely to be Slack or Discord or Twitter or MS Teams or even LinkedIn today to chat with your peers. If you want to build your reputation, you're probably going to be publishing content on social media channels. If you want to learn the best tech techniques in any space, you're probably going to be visiting blogs and YouTube channels and Reddit and newsletters. There's lots of different places where you can go today that aren't just a forum. And I think this is being a challenge. It's really limited the real benefits of a forum to fewer and fewer use cases. So we know that platforms have stagnated. We know that Reddit has also been a big impact. The other thing that we're seeing is that we're at the end of the acquisition era. Over the last, I think, 5 or 6 years, most of the major platforms in this space have been acquired by other organizations, often CRMs. If you look at the Forrester Wave report from 2009 and compare it to 2023, what you'll notice is that there's a big difference in the platforms that have survived. But what happened to all of the other platforms that are out there that used to thrive? What happened to Jive and Mazinga and Awareness, which honestly I've never heard of, leveraged software? Now we have fewer and fewer players in this space. And that's been the result of the acquisition era. And I think what we're also going to see, a lot of the new entrants in this space probably aren't going to thrive. There just isn't a big enough market for them to support, at least not at the enterprise level. And there's been such a raft of acquisitions over the last few years, with Telligent being acquired by Verin, Jive being acquired by Lithium, and then being acquired and merged with Spreadfast to create Chorus, Slack and Salesforce Community Cloud now being part of Experience Cloud, Vanilla, Higher Logic, Insided to Gainsight. Discourse is perhaps the only last remaining independent platform, and be interested to see what happens with that. But the challenge we've had is that these acquisitions haven't necessarily been a universally positive thing. Customers especially have been very disappointed with how the experience has gone since the acquisition, and it's hard to point to any of these acquisitions being a success for any of the customers that are being on one of these platforms that were acquired. The next question is, will AI save or kill these hosted communities that are out there today? And I think we're right at that moment where we're going to find out what's going to happen. Are they going to rejuvenate and breathe new life into these platforms, or kill them off? And honestly, I don't think we know yet, but I think we will know really, really soon, especially over the next year when all these platforms start to show what's behind the curtain, what have they been working on, and how well that is used by the clients that they have. We've actually been doing a lot of research on how organizations are using Gen AI at the moment, and it's interesting that generally there's been some pilot schemes, some dabbling around with this, but no one is really doing a huge lot with Gen AI at the moment. Around a third of us have done at least something. 60% of us have already adopted or plan to adopt these tools in some capacity, but there aren't any, I think, incredible use cases of it in action right now today. But I wouldn't be surprised if this had changed since we did the research a couple of months ago. And generally speaking, Gen AI is a bunch of pilot schemes at the moment in terms of creating content, generating answers from existing resources, but that's going to change. I think over time, we're going to be focusing more on saving time and improving the member experience. But right now, there's a lot of pilot schemes in place, and this is what's going to be tested and what we're going to build upon. However, what is interesting is that most of us are pretty excited by the idea of what Gen AI is going to offer us. Yes, there's still a lot of uncertainty about it. Yes, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But overall, most of us think it's going to be a positive impact compared with a negative impact. So you can definitely check out this entire report. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And a good way of thinking about it is taking what is theoretical and turning it into a workflow. Because we know Gen AI is useful in different ways in different situations based upon the volume of training data that you can train this technology on and the level of precision that's required. And by that I mean, if you're giving someone, say, medical advice, then that level of precision has to be incredibly high. Whereas if you're recommending, say, a potential solution to a problem with Microsoft Windows, then maybe it doesn't matter if there's a mistake 1 in 20 times, because 19 times it gets the right answer. And so we know that when the volume of training data is high and the level of precision required is high, AI can assist it. It can improve the experience. We know when the level of precision required is low, AI can automate certain situations here. And we know when the volume of training data is low and the level of precision is high, this is probably a distraction. And then we know when both are low, this is when AI can generate and save time. And I think this is where it gets really practical. What I'd recommend you start doing is start looking at your workflows today and looking at what you spend your time doing, and then thinking about where can AI assist you, what can it automate, where can it generate new content and resources for you, and where is there a distraction. And you can start planning out where AI can and can't have an impact on your organization. Chat box as well. We've tested this out in ChatGPT. And yeah, ChatGPT can kind of answer a question as long as the answer already exists somewhere in the documentation. So AI bots aren't that far away from being at a high level yet, but I don't think it's going to be a big thing. But I think the really big question for a lot of us right now is what's going to happen. Obviously, if people are getting their answers from a chatbot, there are less questions in the community, which means there's less training data. And this cycle, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But we don't know the answer to that yet. But I think by next year, we will know. From speaking to the clients that we've been working with, we haven't seen a decline in search traffic or engagement yet, but that definitely might change in the future. 2, the community everywhere era. What we're finding is that we're increasingly building communities across multiple platforms that are out there today. And that also means we have to change our approach. We know that hosted communities represent a declining percentage of the total discussions that are out there. And people are engaging with each other in different ways in different channels. It could be on a course, and that's a community. It could be on a LinkedIn account, that's a community. It could be a subreddit. It could be comments on a YouTube video. But my belief is that if people are engaging somewhere, there's no reason that can't be a community. And it's probably a good place where we might want to consider engaging as well. So we need to change our definition because the preferences have changed. And what we fundamentally need to do today is take a far more member-centric approach as opposed to a platform-centric approach. I spoke about this already. In the past, what we would do is drive everyone to a hosted community to satisfy all their needs. But what we know today is that the needs remain the same. We still have that same need for belonging, for learning, for support and influence. But the places we go to satisfy those needs have fundamentally changed, and we need to adapt and change with those needs as well. And what that's going to mean is that community-based programs, the things that we run every single day, have to change as well. They have to be implemented across multiple platforms that are out there. Whether that's creating content, whether it's helping people lead, building advocates, creating a sense of belonging, I think we're going to see more and more programs that span multiple channels. And it's also going to mean that we're going to have to get better at mapping out what's in the ecosystem at the moment. One of the biggest, I think, tragedies of a lot of the work that we've done and this platform-centric mindset we've had is that it assumes that nothing else exists. For most brands, they're still using the same playbook today from how we're building online communities maybe 10, 15 years ago. Which is we find a vendor, we launch the platform, we drive people to that platform, we incentivize some super users to engage, and then it grows from there. But that ignores everything that existed in that ecosystem already. wouldn't it be better just to analyze what's out there today, map that ecosystem out, and then see how we can support it and where can we add unique value to that ecosystem? One of the things we're doing more and more about clients is that we're mapping out what's in the ecosystem at the moment. We're mapping out whether there's a relationship or not, as you can see by the thick or the dotted line or the no line at all. And then we're mapping out the attitude of each of those things in the ecosystem towards the brand. And what we want to do is build closer, tighter connections with people in that ecosystem. We want to increase the size of the bubbles that are in that as well, because that's how everyone wins. And that's how we build a much better experience for everyone. So mapping out the ecosystem, I think, is going to be more and more important. And it means we're going to have to change our roles as well. Many of us are still managing a community with a single goal and a single platform. As we evolve to the strategist stage, I think there's going to be another step beyond that, where we can evolve to community architects. And this is more and more of the work that we're doing with the clients that we work with, where we know fundamentally that we need to create structures for communities to thrive across the entire enterprise. And so that means creating a common strategy, the governance structure, the stakeholder engagement, the technology framework and the roadmap and best practices, and helping each department get the most out of their communities that they're engaging with. It means having more consistency in the platforms we use, satisfying the right needs for the right members, but just making sure that we're not just a barrier or that thing that separates the organization from the community, but we're the force that brings them together. I think that's a great role that a lot of us can evolve to. And finally, there's new opportunities, new headaches. Some of the things that come up a lot is, what is the real goal of our community? Are you a support channel or not? Being very clear about the model of community that you're building and making sure that the value to members that everything you're doing is 100% aligned to that. That's one of the things we have to make that decision on, because there's still a lot of confusion about what kind of communities we're doing and a mishmash of different ideas. We need to be very clear about the model that we're building. And it's going to depend a lot on the maturity level as well. If you're in a mature ecosystem, then you can do different things compared to if you're just the only game in town. For many organizations with a small audience, that central Q&A strategy will still work absolutely fine. You can keep doing with the same playbook that's been working for a long time. But for larger organizations, you need a different approach. You might need a leader-led strategy where you support the leaders that are in that ecosystem today. As I said, hosted communities do remain the option for many organizations, but this changes the larger that your community becomes and the larger that your audience becomes. Sonos, for example, has both a hosted community, then they've got a users group. Sony, exactly the same. They've got these Facebook groups, which combined have more activity and are more popular than the platforms than their centrally hosted communities out there. And these aren't run by them. They're run by fans and other people in that space. But a lot of this will, of course, tread upon the turf of other departments. And that's why we need that community architect there. Someone that doesn't report to any of these departments, but they run their own thing and they're able to make everyone aligned and work together. They're a function that serves as a support for other organizations. And it means we always have to begin with that audience-first approach. We know that there's different goals, different platforms that make sense for those goals, and different behaviors that we want people to take. And the goal of the architect is to be clear about who each department is targeting, help them decide what platform they need to use, and make sure there's a consistency in that approach so everyone is having the best experience, especially members who aren't being contacted by different people in different ways and at different times. The final part of this is how we drive growth. We know that the last couple of years have been brutal. Budgets have been cut in a major way, and the biggest impact of that is that often many of us have to do more with less. And that means we need to get better at prioritizing what we're doing. We need to get better at doing UX research, as we do with a lot of the clients, to figure out what are the things that will have the biggest impact in the short term. We need to be prioritizing the programs that have the biggest long-term impact on most people, and being ruthless about stopping the things that don't have a big long-term impact. There's also a lot of pressure to drive growth. A lot of communities, even today, their goal is to simply reduce customer support costs. And that's not a bad goal, but it's difficult when your community becomes a certain size for that still to be the only goal you have. So we have to evolve from just cutting costs to driving growth. And you see it in a lot of the researchers out there today. Gradually, there's being a shift from just support to acquisition to marketing. Communities are increasingly becoming a marketing tool, not just a customer support tool. And there are things you can do within a hosted community that will drive growth. There are ways that you can connect your community activities, the attitudes that achieve the kind of results that you want to achieve. But I think also it's going to be a big role for more innovative models in the space. Whether it could be a place of having links to community content and places where people can buy and recommendations and automatic AI links, whether it's paid events or membership or community as a benefit that people will pay for, or maybe it's just advertising space in communities. We know with the larger communities especially, there's so many people, so many eyeballs that visit these places, that maybe there's opportunities for advertising as well. But at the very least, most of us can at least have more reviews and ratings and testimonials to increase the conversion rate, to acquire new customers, especially from the comparison sites that are out there today. I know we're running a little short on time, so let me just go through this very quickly. The final one is having new methods to prove value of the community. It's driven me so crazy over the last couple of years that the means that we use to measure ROI really haven't changed much. A lot of us are still using call deflection. And the problem with that is that reminds me of the public relations approach, where they would measure the advertising value equivalent, which is if you got some coverage in a newspaper, you would find out how much it costs to advertise in that newspaper, and then that would be what you assume the ROI was. But these things are clearly not the same, and PR professionals have stopped doing that. But we're still in that same kind of position, where we know that just measuring these kind of things, and especially with call deflection, it doesn't make sense. And we need to think about different metrics that we can use. I think call deflection especially is increasingly antiquated, and it doesn't really measure the real return of most of the communities out there today. And the methodology is problematic because we never know if someone that visited an answer actually got the answer that they wanted to or not. If someone visits 5 questions, they post a question, and then they contact support, many of us won't account for that. We'll still see it as 5 responses, 5 calls that we have deflected within the community. And that's a problem. And this is also an issue because of this. When Google will show the result in search results, the person is getting what they want, but we don't have the data that will reflect that. And I think another problem with measurement as well is that we're getting access to increasingly less data than what we did before. We're in a very privacy-aware era at the moment, and based upon the data you have, you are limited in the questions that you can answer and the answers that you can get. It's one thing to say, measure the ROI of the community. It's another thing entirely to really drill deep into what you can do with the data you have access to. And a lot of our work and a lot of things that a lot of us need to do is change the goal of what we're measuring, or change what we're measuring to prove the ROI. And there's always going to be a trade-off between precision and simplicity, between causation and correlation. And so we've got to start going through internally, is there precise dollar value required? Because if it's not, and for many departments it's not, then it opens up the door to measure the change in attitudes. And this opens up the door to have metrics actually make sense. For many of our clients, we've been using that community-driven impact score, which is a really simple question, very similar to the Net Promoter Score, which is on a scale of 0 to 10, how's the community influence? And then you could have any outcome that you want. In this case, the likelihood of renewing your subscription. And this is where you get really precise, really specific results. And you can say things like 60% of our members said the community was a decisive factor in influencing their descriptions. So what we'll see is that a small number of very well-funded communities will have the skills and the internal resources to be able to do this, to measure ROI in a very statistically valid way. But for everyone else, we're going to have to become more flexible in how we measure it and look at a change in attitudes as much as anything else. So that was a lot of information in a really short amount of time. I know I only had 20 minutes, but hopefully we got through it okay. If you want to learn more about me, you can just with hello@feverbee.com. And yeah, you know who I am already. But thank you so much, everyone.